It is about 11 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. And here, beautiful Northeast Texas, some lazy cow farms. And last night we got like 2.5 inches of rain. It just stormed for a long time last night. And the ground just seemed to soak it up. Not much puddling throughout my pasture, which is what I want to see. I want to see that water penetrate the dirt and get down there. The soil was starting to dry out a little bit at the surface there. Makes it hard to drive stakes in the ground and stuff like that. But anyway, not much news to report. The rams are still separated. They're down there in the pen still. They haven't left. I'm going to leave them there for a couple more days. And then I'm going to put them with the bulls. We'll have the rams and the bulls together. They'll be able to eat as much forage as they want. Hopefully that'll help strengthen them for the winter season. Anyway, I want to link to a video that Alan Westerfield he put out recently. He has some really good thoughts, and I think the point of this video was that if you're not going to take the sheep disease seriously, if you're not going to seriously watch your sheep, you're going to get disappointed because the sheep are going to get sick and die on you, and you'll be surprised. I can't disagree with much in his video. The only couple thoughts that I had is he's testing his animals for CL, and I just don't know how effective that test is. I don't remember if that's the PCR test. There was one of the diseases that they use a PCR test, and if you don't know how PCR works, that's like looking for a needle in a haystack by creating a machine that copies all the needles until there's enough needles that you could see them. The issue with that method is that sometimes, just like when you tune into a radio and you get static, you can amplify that static and you might think you hear stuff. There's a chance that the random static will replicate and you'll be seeing things that aren't actually there, right? And the guy who invented the PCR test, he's absolutely against using it for testing for the presence of DNA sequences because of that problem. It's a nice little gimmick. It gets you quick results, but the results are not they're not reliable, right? So testing, number one, be sure that the tests actually do what they say they do. Understand what the margin of error is with the test. Understand how Bayesian theorem work, right? So Bayes theorem says that if there's a small chance that your animal has a particular disease, and there's a good chance or a non-zero chance that the test might be a false positive, right? And the question is, are you just seeing a false positive, or are you seeing a true positive? And more often than not with rare diseases, the answer is it's a false positive, right? So you're still not very likely to have the disease just because one of the tests comes back and says you have it, right? And that's just an unfortunate fact of reality, So figure out what those error bars are, figure out what the false positive and the false negative rates are, and behave accordingly. Now, the other thing too is the whole theory of vaccines. I think right now, based on what we've seen recently about how the medical profession was talking about vaccines, that their reputation is shot, right? They got caught lying. Number one, do the vaccines actually stop the disease, right? And number two, do the vaccines cause severe side effects, right? And I think we're finding out now that the answer to those questions is not the answer that we were told, right? More study needed is what I presume. Now, my operation here, and I accept full responsibility for this, is I'm trying to start from ground zero. What happens if I don't do any antibiotics or vaccines or worming treatment or anything else, right? And you might think the answer is obvious, that of course your animals aren't going to perform as well as the ones that do. But I don't think that's obvious at all. I think there's too much that we've assumed, and we trust our vets and our doctors too much. And especially we trust the drug companies that are trying to sell us things too much, right? Fertilizer, they said, hey, put this nitrogen on your soil, your grass will grow taller. Yeah, it did grow taller, but it was devoid of nutrition. And it damaged the soil. And then we became dependent upon fertilizer, right? So there's side effects to everything. And if you go back and study Francis Bacon, his point was that unless you can sit down and figure out what the biases are and eliminate them, or at least account for them, you really can't trust what people tell you, right? And that's kind of the foundation of knowledge, is finding out for yourself what's actually true and what's not. So I've heard good reports about people that have been doing regenerative agriculture. I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to see what the results are. If it works, it works. If some of the animals die, well, some of the animals would have died under other systems too, right? There's no flawless, foolproof system, right? Antibiotics aren't magical. They don't solve all the diseases. Dewormers often kill animals. They don't talk about that too much, but it's true. You can read about deworming shock or whatever they call it nowadays. But there's a lot that's uncertain, even in agricultural science, which you'd think, because it's not unethical to do experimentation upon animals, especially if you're trying to understand how to make those animals live healthier, happier lives, right? That's not unethical. It's unethical to do it on humans, right? Not unethical to do it on animals, right? And you'd think that we'd have a solid body of evidence and we'd be able to say stuff we know for sure, but the truth is, like, real knowledge is few and far between, right? So you got to take care. You got to keep notes. You got to keep a journal. I think he said he keeps a journal. You got to, see what you did and what happened and make your adjustments and see what happens. And it's all up to you. It really is in your ballpark. You're the guy up to bat, and you got to take responsibility for that kind of stuff, So, and if you want to give the regenerative shot, is it easier than rounding up the sheep every once in a while and shooting them full of medicine? Yeah, it's a little bit easier. Does it get rid of animal death? No, animals still die. It's always heartbreaking. If you're a human, it's going to tug on your heartstrings there, But anyway, that's my thoughts. Pay attention to what he's saying. He's saying a different message than what I'm saying. Listen to him. I'm not saying he's wrong, because I think he's right. You got to take responsibility, and what form that responsibility takes, that's up to you, And he was just trying to tell people, he's like, I'm not willing to sell my animals right now because I believe that they have a disease that I don't want to spread. That's what he was saying. And, I applaud him for that. That's we need more people like that are willing to be honest and stuff, So anyway, guys, you have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.